use of thromboprophylaxis, and mainly what comes to mind is heparin. And heparin is safest in pregnancy as a thromboprophylaxis to be used. So a patient after 8 consecutive miscarriages, whether with all her blood tests, miscarriage screen coming negative, should you think of starting heparin? Well, the book answer is no. Patient B presents with a positive pregnancy test. She has had 2 DVTs in the past 7 years. Will you start her on heparin? The answer is yes. Patient C is pregnant for the first time. Her sister is positive for APS and has had aspirin and heparin treatment after 4 pregnancy losses. So, do you start her on heparin? The answer is no. And patient D is diagnosed with APS and has had 3 miscarriages. Now she is 5.3 weeks. So for her, yes, we will start her on heparin. 8 weeks duration in the postpartum for a patient E who is heterozygous for factor V Leiden. Yes, this is also another patient who will require heparin use in pregnancy. So basically, heparin is majorly used by us obstetricians when we are dealing with a case of recurrent pregnancy loss. And if a patient comes to you with previous 3 losses and she asks you, what are the chances of my having a normal child, even if I don't do any investigations or don't see a doctor? Well, from the history, the chances of having a repeat abortion after 1 spontaneous abortion remains as 15%. That is the basal rate. After 2 consecutive abortions, it goes up to 25 to 30%. After 3 consecutive abortions, it goes up to 45%. So a woman who's had even 3 consecutive losses, she still has a 55% chance of having a normal, healthy baby in future. So everything is not bleak for them. And a woman who has had a live birth, even if she has multiple losses, the future risk of having an abortion remain at 30%. So this is something which needs to be known and told to the woman. And after investigations, when you investigate this patient for multiple pregnancy losses, the contributing factor can be identified in 40 to 50% of the time. And when treated, the prognosis for successful pregnancy outcome is almost 80%. So, there is definitely a role for investigations. So let us look at the causes of multiple abortions. And what we are going to focus on means we have genetic factors, anatomical factors, endocrine factors, infections, etc. But what we are focusing is on autoimmune and unexplained thrombophilias. That is what we are going to talk about today. And if you do this battery of tests, and like we saw in our example, if nothing comes positive, there's no conclusive positive test which we get after investigating a patient of recurrent pregnancy loss, do you start on heparin empirically? Well, the answer is no, because there is a lot of studies like the SPIN study and a LIFE study which say that there's no benefit of starting low dose aspirin and heparin in a patient of unexplained RPL if none of the tests have come positive. So let's go to another clinical situation. A gravidify comes at 6 weeks of pregnancy, 1 missed abortion at 9 weeks, 2nd, chemical pregnancy, 3rd, ectopic pregnancy. Then we did an HSG, cavity was normal, right tube was patent. She landed up with a missed abortion at 10 weeks, for which we did karyotype, and the POC karyotype was normal. So basically, does she fit into a recurrent pregnancy loss? Well, technically, she has had 2 abortions over here, but the ectopic and biochemical pregnancies are technically not included in a recurrent pregnancy loss definition. So we have to remember that. And when we talk of thrombophilias, yes, we do screen her for thrombophilias even after 2 losses now. And when you talk of thrombophilias, we all know there's the acquired variety, the antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, which concerns us obstetricians very much. And we have a whole list of inherited thrombophilias like activated protein C resistance, factor V Leiden mutation, protein S, protein C, prothrombin gene mutation, and antithrombin 3 deficiency, etc. So these are what we are going to talk about today. And the classification criteria, let's talk about antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, because that is something which we can pick up and treat and hope to give at least a 70 to 80% success rate to the woman. So APLA basically should have a vascular thrombosis happening and a pregnancy morbidity. Now, the pregnancy morbidity should be 3 or more unexplained consecutive miscarriages with anatomical, genetic, or hormonal causes excluded. 1 or more unexplained deaths of a morphologically normal fetus at or after the 10th week of gestation. 1 or more premature births of a morphologically normal neonate on or before 34 weeks of gestation associated with severe preeclampsia or severe placental insufficiencies. And what is the laboratory criteria? Laboratory criteria, you should have anticardiolipin antibody, IgG or IgM present, lupus anticoagulant either by any of these tests present. Generally, what we do now is a dilute Russell Viper venom test. So you have lupus anticoagulant, anticardiolipin antibody, and the third test which we do is anti-beta-2 glycoprotein 1. And this has become also an important test. And Sapporo's criteria says that APS is defined by one clinical criteria of either vascular thrombosis or fetal morbidity, and one immunological criteria of either lupus anticoagulant or ACLA present. So basically, the screening guidelines of ASHRAE in 2017 have said for women with RPL, screening is recommended for antiphospholipid antibodies after 2 pregnancy losses. And women with RPL, screening for beta-2 glycoprotein can be also considered. So that is good. So this case which I had presented, we did the investigations and the lupus came positive. So if APLA, can we do without treating APA? In women with recurrent miscarriages associated with antiphospholipid antibodies, a live birth weight in pregnancies with no pharmacological intervention has been reported to be as low as 10%. So yes, APLA we definitely treat. Antiphospholipid antibodies basically bind to trophoblasts, exaggerating complement activity, stimulate inflammatory cells, and cause injury to the developing uteroplacental unit, and that's why it results in abortions. So the obstetric antiphospholipid syndrome treatment does help, because another study has shown that very good fetal and maternal outcomes in women with obstetric OPS when it was treated. And investigators defined pure obstetric APS as pregnancy morbidity in women with no previous history of thrombosis. So treatment with heparin and aspirin, when do we start? What is the dose? Here it is. Low molecular weight heparin versus unfractionated heparin is what they compared, and the results were the same. So both the plain the unfractionated heparin and the low molecular weight heparin, both are similar in efficacy. So it is much cheaper to use the unfractionated variety, but low molecular weight heparin has a lot of advantages like decreased frequency of dosing, lower incidence of thrombocytopenia, decreased bone loss, and thus for prolonged anticoagulation, what we are looking for in pregnancy, low molecular weight heparin is preferred. So what is the prophylactic dose of low molecular in antiphospholipid antibody syndrome? You can give low molecular weight heparin, enoxaparin 40 milligrams a day subcutaneous, or deltaparin 5,000 international units per day subcutaneous. And if you are using unfractionated heparin, you can give 5,000 units twice daily in the first trimester, increase it to 7,500 units twice daily in the second trimester, and you may have to increase it to 10,000 units twice daily in the third trimester, because it's more frequently given. It's a little bit of a cumbersome thing for the patient to take. Now, when you have a patient of APLA, but who has had a venous thrombotic event in the past, you have to give the full anticoagulation. And over there, it is low. The enoxaparin is 1 milligram per kilogram subcutaneous every 12 hours. That is the regular dose which is given. Deltaparin is 2,000 international unit kilogram subcutaneous per day. And unfractionated heparin, if you are using subcutaneous doses, 12 or 8-hourly interval, so as to maintain a PPT 2 times the patient's normal PPT, which is to be checked 3 to 5 hours after the injection. So during pregnancy, this we have done. The dosage is easier to give when you are using a low molecular weight heparin. It's only once daily dosing, and the risk of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and osteoporosis is less, and you require a less intensive monitoring. Okay, so but you can use unfractionated heparin also. Now, how do you what do you have to maintain? You maintain a mid-interval anti-factor 10A activity level of approximately 0.05 to 0.2 units per ml. But in general, when we use clinically low molecular weight heparin, we hardly have to even monitor. But if we have to monitor, the unfractionated heparin is very easily monitored by activated partial thromboplastin time. But for low molecular weight heparin, we have to basically, it requires the direct measurement of the anti-factor 10A activity. So it's a little bit cumbersome to monitor, but generally we don't require monitoring of the low molecular weight heparin. Now, side effects of heparin, we all know there'll be a little bit of bone loss happening. Thrombocytopenia will happen immediate type, which is reversible and does not require discontinuation of therapy, which happens in the first 7 days. And late onset time may occur from 5 to 14 days onwards. So how do you decide the dose of heparin? A very simple guide is, if you have thrombophilia plus you have a venous thrombotic event but no adverse pregnancy outcome, then the prophylactic heparin for treatment is to be given, and means you just use the prophylactic dose. And if there is APLA, then you use full anticoagulation. If you have thrombophilia plus VTE plus adverse pregnancy outcome, again, you have to use the full anticoagulation and not only the therapeutic dose of what has been defined. If you have a antithrombin 3 deficiency, then a full anticoagulation needs to be given. The next question is, when do we stop heparin and aspirin? Effectively stopping low molecular weight heparin 24 hours before planned induction of labor is recommended. But if we are obstetricians, we all know labor can happen anytime. So effectively stopping prophylactic low-dose heparin or unfractionated heparin at about 38 weeks of gestation to await spontaneous labor can be thought of, or switch over to unfractionated heparin at about 36 weeks with instructions to discontinue at the earliest stages of spontaneous labor. The additional advantages of using unfractionated heparin include monitoring by APTT measurement, the ability to completely reverse the heparin effect with protamine sulfate if major bleeding occurs. So basically that is the options you have. Either switch it over to an unfractionated variety or stop 24 hours before induction of labor or surgery. Let's come to inherited thrombophilia. A meta-analysis of retrospective studies have reported a strong association between second trimester miscarriage and inherited thrombophilia like factor V laden, factor II, thrombin G mutation, and protein S deficiency. Women with second trimester miscarriage should be screened for inherited thrombophilia, including factor V laden and protein S and factor II prothrombin gene mutation. And even the ASHRAE guidelines say that for women with RPL, screening is not recommended for hereditary thrombophilia. And these are patients with first trimester abortions, unless you're doing it in a context of research. So basically, hereditary thrombophilias are more associated with second trimester losses and not the first trimester losses. So do not do an inherited thrombophilia evaluation for a woman with histories of pregnancy loss, intrauterine growth restriction, and preeclampsia and abruption. Do it only if there has been a second trimester loss or repeated second trimester harm. But even if you screen for inherited thrombophilias, does heparin and aspirin work in these conditions? Heparin therapy during pregnancy may improve the live birth weight in women with second trimester miscarriage associated with inherited thrombophilia. There is some evidence to that. There's insufficient evidence to evaluate the effect of heparin in pregnancy to prevent a miscarriage in women with recurrent first trimester miscarriage associated with inherited thrombophilia. So yes, second trimester miscarriage, yes, heparin may help. First trimester miscarriages, no, it will not help. So let's go to another clinical case. A fit and a well 32-year-old pregnant is referred at 8 weeks of gestation. At 24 years of age, she had a deep calf vein thrombosis and a broken fibula after an automobile accident. She was not on contraceptive pills. Her sister, who lives abroad, had DVT in pregnancy at 36 weeks and was found to have antithrombin deficiency. So what do? You reassure her that a thrombosis was provoked not by estrogen, but by factors that no longer apply, the trauma and the immobilization. So is that correct? No, because 20 to 50% of women with venous thrombosis have thrombophilia. So basically, yes, you need to do a thrombophilia screen. Start her on standard thromboprophylaxis, as she may also be at risk of DVT in pregnancy. No, because she's just 8 weeks, and if the screen comes negative, there's no need, just because she's had a event which has led to a thrombosis earlier. Offer a thromboprophylaxis for 6 weeks postpartum as she has family history of thrombosis. Again, that is a no. Offer a thromboprophylaxis for 6 weeks postpartum as she has personal history of thrombosis. Yeah, she's had thrombosis on her own, but that was because of an event and not because of anything which is wrong with her. So that the answer is no. So a 38-year-old previously fit and well patient presents at 4 p.m. at 32 weeks of gestation with a 3-day history of shortness of breath that began suddenly. Now, this is, if you come across the situation, this 38-year-old one has 32 weeks gestation, has a twin pregnancy, well-grown babies, she's short-statured, and she has no additional risk factors, but she's presenting with you with shortness of breath. What will you think of? Perform a general examination and a chest x-ray. If both are normal, you put it down to pregnancy with twins and ask her to take it easy. Will you do that? Well, no, because you have to investigate whether there is any embolic phenomena occurring here. Quickly arrange a duplex stand of both the lungs before the USG department closes. And if no DVT is seen, she can go home. So you just screen for a deep vein thrombosis. No, because 30% of pulmonary embolisms occur without detectable DVTs. So remember that. You do a computerized topography, pulmonary angiography. Yes, you do that to investigate. So you are thinking in terms of a pulmonary embolism. Start prophylactic low molecular weight heparin till the next day where a definite investigation can be performed. No. And start low molecular weight heparin and discuss with radiologist if perfusion scan can be carried out. Yes. So yes, you will probably start on this and discuss if perfusion scans can be carried out. So that's how you deal with heparin in pregnancy. Another example, a 36-year-old multipara patient presents in early labor at 5 a.m. She has a history of DVT at 28 weeks of pregnancy. She's on therapeutic doses of low molecular weight heparin, and the last dose was taken at 8 p.m. last evening. The current gestation is 35 weeks, and her previous 2 deliveries were both induced for post-maturity. Cervix is effaced but not dilated. She asks you for an epidural. So what will be your answer? You will check the APTT levels, and if normal, she can have an epidural. Yes. Advise her it is fine if she can have it after 8 a.m. if she labors. What do you think of this? It will be 12 hours since the last dose. But it is no, because she's on a therapeutic dose of low molecular weight heparin and not a prophylactic dose. So you have to wait for 24 hours since the last dose. Advise her that it will not be safe to insert an epidural until 24 hours after the last dose, so as not to inject any more and to admit and observe her. Yes. Admit her and change to unfractionated heparin. Yes. Advise her to have no further heparin till after delivery to reduce the risk of bleeding. No, because she is a patient who had had DVTs in the past, so you can't afford to do that. So some other conditions where heparin is used is in nowadays in IVF pregnancies, they say to help implantation. And yes, sometimes we carry them for the first 3 months at least. And people who have had multiple abortions and IVF pregnancy. But if the patient does land up with hyperstimulation syndrome with enlarged ovaries and she is admitted, yes, these patients also require heparin as a therapy. And of course, you use them in obese patients. And remember, it's very important. You have an obese patient, you have done a cesarean or any other surgery, even if it's a laparoscopy, post-operative care to prevent a DVT, don't forget thromboprophylaxis is very useful. So I've tried to give you a little clinical glimpse of what, where all situations heparin can be used in pregnancy. And well, that was about the lecture. Thank you very much. And if I have the chairperson's permission and Kumarji's permission, I wanted to.
Please play the teaser. We are waiting.
I wanted to share the screen for that only. So this was, sorry. So this is what we have. ICOG has just released Diamonds Are Forever, the second episode. I wanted to, it is on YouTube for everybody to see. You can just log in into YouTube ICOG channel, or you can go to the ICOG website and it is there for you to see.
Not able to hear any voice.
Sorry, I forgot to take out my earphones. That's the reason.
Sir, you need to click on the share sound.
Yeah, no, I forgot to, oh, sorry. Yeah. I forgot to take out my earphones. You know, I was speaking over the earphones. So. welcome you to the second episode of Diamonds Are Forever.
It's an absolute privilege to contribute to the Diamonds Are Forever series, particularly about Dr. Padwarden and maybe what we can learn here in the UK from obstetrics in India.
So sorry.
We'll see it on YouTube.
No, there was some noise happening here, so I wanted to shut that. I welcome you to the second episode of Diamonds Are Forever.
It's an absolute privilege to contribute to the Diamonds Are Forever series, particularly about Dr. Padwarden and maybe what we can learn here in the UK from obstetrics in India.
I, Dr. Medha Arvind Patkar, is the second daughter of Dr. B.D. Patwardhan.
I'm going to describe the Patwardhan's maneuver, which was originally described in the year 1957.
Dr. B.D. Patwardhan was my maternal grandfather, and we fondly used to call him Bhau. Everyone used to call him Bhau.
We want to highlight the importance of training in dealing with impacted fetal heads, and for this to include Patwardhan maneuver where required.
In the United States, I would say that it is pretty much underused and probably fairly unknown.
We really want to work together to share our knowledge and improve understanding of the technique. And we do feel that Patwardhan method should be incorporated into training and the toolbox of skills that obstetricians have.
To popularize a method would be to kind of do more research and publish it, and also present it in international conferences so that this method does become more popular and more of us can actually teach it and use it.
Thank you very much, and watch out for this space. So this is it, and it is there on the YouTube. The first episode is very much there on the YouTube for everybody to see. The second episode, where we have the inputs from the West, will be released next week. So please watch out for that. I thank you very much for giving this opportunity, Dr. Mitra Saxena, Dr. Kunjamideen, and the whole POGS Society. It has been lovely to talk to you. Thank you.